Archaeologists believe that these had been pre-prepared by Themistocles' enemies to be handed out to Athenian voters who couldn't write. Themistocles never recovered from this humiliation. He was to spend the rest of his years wandering from state to state, finally dying in exile in Persia. Now looking for a leader who might fulfill their newfound sense of imperial glory. They found a man who seemed the perfect reflection of this new ideal. A man who would change the face of Athens forever. A man named Pericles.
There's probably not a more important figure in the history of classical Greece than Pericles. He was the leader of Athens at the height of its power and of its artistic achievement. He was the figure associated appropriately with bringing Athenian democracy to its climax, to its height.
But Pericles was no obvious democrat like Themistocles, for he had been born into one of Athens' most elite families. Perhaps because of his aristocratic origins, Pericles knew what the people of Athens now wanted. A city fit to rule an empire.
Absolutely. The main thing, like right now, they got entertainers now fleeing the country talking about they're gonna be in
Jadetv, she's on the way over here.
Allow people to live on the boat year round for like starting at $24,000. So a lot of these entertainers is running like they did in 2016. So if you go back to 2016, a lot of entertainers like, oh my God, if he went, they was acting like the world's gonna end. And nothing happened to them, right? So this time they still trying to do the field mongering. They kept saying, okay, the man's Hitler. But when he was in there, the people he killed was on you could put on you could count on one hand. Obama them was the killers. Bush them was the killers. Clinton them was the killers. They had wars.
Obama, I mean, documented. He was the person who was responsible for children and women to meet their demise.
Yeah, they said
it's documented.
Like, they said he used more weapons than anybody. Missiles.
And this is what I'm trying to say.
So when you start
from this supporting Israel,
they're gonna keep doing that. They're gonna keep doing that because Israel is controlling these people through various means. You know, like I said, like Epstein, people like Epstein have got these people in sexual compromise.
Do you think Epstein is he still around, or do you reckon he's gone?
He's gone. I did a
okay, you done a reading, didn't you?
I did a reading.
Where are we now in the smack circle? Where kind of in the last stages of, say, the evil stages, isn't it? You can put it.
Yeah, but the thing is, you know, what Biden has done is putting us up on World War III now because of him messing with Putin and giving Ukraine missiles.
Well, that comes under NATO as well, doesn't it?
Huh?
That's also NATO.
That was what?
NATO.
Yeah, all this stuff is, like I said, this is what Biden is doing. He's setting Trump up the same way they set him up with China in the virus. But this is going to affect peace. That's
and then he wants to take the credit. Sorry, he wants to take the credit for the ceasefire in Israel. And he actually gave the go-ahead, which I think was a wicked thing to do. He sent the go-ahead for the American missiles to be used in Ukraine.
President Vladimir Putin has said that Russia struck Ukraine with 90 missiles and 100 drones overnight in response to Ukraine's attacks with UK and US weapons last week. He added that Russia was selecting targets in Ukraine that could include decision-making centers in Kyiv. More than 1 million Ukrainians, it's estimated, have been left without power following the overnight assault on Ukraine's energy sector, which lasted for almost 9.5 hours. The disruption to the electricity supply is a mix of damage to that infrastructure as well as emergency power cuts. In Kyiv, many people sheltered in the city's underground stations. Military sources say all the missiles and drones used by Russia on the capital were intercepted, but that falling debris caused some minor damage.
This is what Big and them didn't want to look at. When we was they don't see that's this is they call the Trump illusion. What Victor and them didn't want to look at the real issues in the warmongers. It's one thing if Trump was doing this stuff when he was in there last time, but all they doing is keep y'all talking about the stuff that y'all doing and past Democrat people have done. You know, so that's the thing. Now they ain't gonna they still worrying about Trump instead of worrying about what Biden been doing, pushing Ukraine up that damn ladder to get killed. Because Zelensky, they can't Russia. So the point is, why you sending your people to get killed? You understand? But I'm not going to be insensitive because I look at all this stuff. I'm not going to sit here and not understand that so many people have lost their lives in the name of what they call in politics.
The conflict keep on
When
in the
Trump,
Middle East. I mean, it's absolutely awful. I think it's about 40,000 people have lost their lives, and mostly is women and children.
when Trump went to that conference and that black lady asked him about Kamala and her race and all that, they don't never drill Kamala and them about all those people. See, what they should have did, which the media is disgusting for, when they had Vietnam, them cameras and stuff went over there and showed how gruesome it was. And that's what contributed to the American people stopping Vietnam for going on. They started raising hell over here. When they did that, they didn't do that over here in the United States. They didn't flood the cameras with the negative side of what was happening in Ukraine. And that's why people didn't really respond the way they should have. And they would have been like, look at all these people that's dying. And y'all still giving money that nobody wants to do. You giving them billions of dollars of our tax money. And guess what that does?
Well, they got business over there, haven't they?
It makes us the funders of death.
Absolutely.
That's what it does. It ties us in inadvertently because we ain't got no choice. So we
But also, your taxpayers' money as well, goes towards this. So the same American dollars that could be spent in America on the American people is being spent on weapons of mass destruction to cause harm to other people, which also has another effect on society, which we can see with all these protests with Palestine. And I mean, I understand on this that I cannot condone women and children being hurt. The laws of nature as well. I think Noon talks about that as well. These are crimes against humanity.
But nobody's doing nothing about it. So that's why.
Are you having something to eat?
Like immigration. That's common sense. That's dangerous. You letting in all these people, and you don't even got the manpower to really look at what the heck was going on.
Well, as you said as well, you know, also Todd, you have the impact. You have more people coming in your towns, so all the resources have to be shared more. You also got more policing, they need more hospital spaces, they need more housing, they need more money. So immigration must be controlled. It cannot. I mean, the UK is going for the same predicament, and that's where they failed for 4 years in power as the border czar. Kamala Harris failed miserably.
Everything they did
was for the Agenda 25.
Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. Agenda
Sorry, 21.
Yeah, Agenda 2045, Agenda 2060. All that's part of the UN's United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. All that's part of that. So they thought they was gonna. They were able to get a lot done because they had Trump in there and they did all this stuff under Trump. When y'all continue with the same thing, and y'all is in there. And people seen it. That's what happened. America seen that y'all was allowing it. Even if they don't know who's behind it, the point is, this is why she couldn't talk about what she followed. I can't hear you. You're sounding choppy. Mm-hmm. All right, on our health. It's a war with technology, a war on our kids, a war on the family. Those are different other types of war. So even with somebody running around with a gun and robbing everybody, you barely see that now. You know, certain crimes is like almost non-existent. And so it's easy for people, and it's easy for people to go home and go to sleep and wake up because they're not directly affected. So when I talk to people on their channels about this stuff, it sounds like I'm trying to talk about the boogeyman. But I'm not doing that. I'm saying the boogeyman just does it different over here than they do over there in Iran or Palestine or somewhere where they more, that type of crime and violence is rampant. You know, right. Versus we got killers and robbers and all that. They wear suits and stuff. Some people, we don't even see them rob us every day, like the IRS and taxes. We ought to pay taxes out of our check and then got to go to the store and then pay more taxes. So you get taxed year round by basically damn near 100% of wherever you spend your money at, unless they got some discount or something. But the worker over here is being raped financially in all angles. You know, so
well, if they're spending, they got the money. They're spending money to fund wars across the globe, which backfires and makes our lives more in danger, more than anything, and not taking care of their own people. It's, as you said before, it's against the principles of of America. You know what the founding fathers, or the is it the Declaration?
The Constitution.
It goes all against that. You see.
If you look at some of the committee clips they putting online, where they ripping the Democrats about over, the 800-some-thousand children that went missing, and that they did know where they went, and they brought them to the border and gave them over to what they call sponsors, and they saying they don't know where they went, and they saying, that they went to all types of nefarious plans and purposes. And they sitting on a committee.
How could you? I mean, how irresponsible could? I mean, how irresponsible is that? 1 minute you're allowing people to come over the border undocumented, and then for you to send children. I mean, adults, fair enough, in certain situations. But how could you send children to fend for themselves or to?
They was giving them to strangers. They was calling them sponsors, though, people that was not related. They said some places they was dropping children off in certain locations. It was no address. It was none of that. The lady and them was answering this. They were saying, how did y'all lose 88,000 kids?
Wow.
But they not.
I didn't see that one.
It's plenty of them on YouTube. They having these little councils where they interrogate these people. I'm like, is they just telling you things that they did? If me and you did that, we'd be in jail immediately.
Really looking at foster care. I think that's going to be important to making certain that children are properly cared for. Mr. Chairman, I know that you and Senator Hawley discussed the fact that we have no government representative here today.
I mentioned they were not. I mentioned they were not invited.
I think that if my understanding was that there was a choice not to invite someone. The point is Secretary Becerra needs to come before us. I've got a letter I sent to him on April 27th. It was after a hearing at the Finance Committee where he could not give me an answer of what has happened to 85,000 children. 85,000 unaccompanied children. HHS is responsible for them, and they can't find them. They don't know if they're dead or alive or trafficked or being worked because they can't find them. The Office of Refugee Resettlement has lost about a third of the children that they're supposed to be caring for. I think this is shameful. I have not received a response from the Secretary on what has happened to 85,000 children. I will ask to put my letter in the record because he has had this time. The point is, they don't know where these children are and they cannot find them, and they're not doing anything about it. I think that it is shameful, and we need to call him before this committee and find out what has happened with these 85,000 children that they cannot find. Ms. Rees, I want to come to you. You mentioned the southern border as something that could be done to stem this. I've been on the border several times. I see exactly what you're talking about. And it is why last week I introduced the End Child Trafficking Now Act. It would require a DNA test to establish familial relationship. This is something that had been put in place under the Trump administration, but like most Trump-era border policies, the Biden administration chose to end that. It is a 45-minute test. It tells you if a child is related to a person or not. It would put a stop to much of this child recycling, which is disgusting. And I would just like for you to speak for a moment about why it is so critical for the CBP to establish that familial relationship right there at that border with that adult and that child standing in front of them.
We have seen in the past, and we will soon see again, an increase in fake families. The cartels respond to border operations. And if CBP is going to stop taking DNA tests when they suspect a fake family, or if they have seen this child again with a different adult before, then they're going to send more fake families through, which means more suffering of kids, more trafficking, and more terrible results. So it was a bad decision, and they really need to reverse course and continue to test. When the agents who have developed expertise on this suspect fake families, they should be testing them.
And the numbers that I have seen are as many as 30% of the children being presented as a family member at the border are being trafficked. Does that match up with the numbers that you have?
There have been several that have been discovered. So it is effective, and for any family, any child that can be saved from smugglers and adults who are lying and claiming that this child is theirs with obviously ill intent, then that is well worth it.
One of the things that I had noticed as I was preparing for this hearing, Secretary Becerra pressured the Office of Refugee Resettlement to speed up sponsor transfers for unaccompanied alien children, going so far as to say, and I'm quoting him, if Henry Ford had seen this in his plants, he would have never become famous and rich. This is not how you do an assembly line. Now, Secretary Becerra's comment is repulsive, but I think it's also revealing. It confirms what we already know, that Secretary Becerra has no regard for what happens to these children that are released into the country. So I would just like to, well, and I'm over time. Ms. Reese, I'm going to ask you just to send in writing to me how you perceive Secretary Becerra's attitude. What does it do to harm the system and to make children less safe?
I will do that. And just to follow up on your DNA question, one statistic. Between April and June of 2019, ICE was able to identify approximately 275 fraudulent families in just a matter of a couple months.
Thank you. Meet with us, and I think we all enjoyed meeting her family. And indeed, she has a very impressive resume. She has worked hard to build that, but our concerns and our disagreements do lie with how she has addressed child pornography, how she has addressed her sentencing practices, her release policies, her work with terrorists, her work with agencies, overreach that is there, and indeed her immigration policies. And I want to talk a little bit about one of the exchanges that I had with her. I did ask her about the United States versus Virginia case. That was the Supreme Court's landmark women's rights case, and it did strike down VMI's male-only admission policy. Now, I'm not an attorney, but I understand from so many attorneys that this is a case that anyone, first-year law school, would be familiar with. They would know this case, but Judge Jackson claimed not to be familiar with the case, so I asked her whether she agreed with Justice Ginsburg in that case that there are physical differences between men and women that are enduring, and she refused to answer. So then I asked her a very simple question. I asked her to define the word woman. Wasn't a trick question. It's something that everybody learned in grade school science class. But Judge Jackson refused to answer. The fact that she couldn't or wouldn't answer that question speaks volumes. It tells me that Judge Jackson is beholden to the radical left that is teaching our children that they can choose their own sex. It tells me that she is more committed to woke progressive ideology than she is to common sense and the rule of law. And it tells me that she will not be able to decide with impartiality the cases that are sure to come before her as a Supreme Court justice. How, for example, will Judge Jackson be able to resolve sex discrimination claims if she can't decide whether the parties before her are women? How can she decide Title IX cases if she doesn't even agree with Justice Ginsburg that there are enduring physical differences between men and women? We recently saw a Ninth Circuit judge issue a written opinion stating that, and I'm quoting, people of all genders can become pregnant, end quote. And disputes over biological males competing in women's sports are working their way through the federal courts. How can a Judge Jackson decide any of these issues as a Supreme Court justice if she is too afraid of the radical left to give this committee a definition of the word woman? Judge Jackson's refusal to answer my question underscores the dangers of the kind of progressive ideology that she endorses. In the time since Judge Jackson sat before this committee, Disney has eliminated saying boys and girls. The State Department announced you can select X as a gender on your passport. The TSA will implement gender-neutral security screenings. The left has slowly but surely stripped words of their meaning in an attempt to eliminate dissent. And the latest victim of this campaign is the word woman. Americans from across the political spectrum want a Supreme Court justice who isn't divorced from reality, who has common sense, and who will protect their children and their right to rear their children as they see fit. Parents live in fear of the progressive ideology that is being pushed in some of our schools. I hear from them regularly. But Judge Jackson's answer to my question made perfectly clear to me and to everyone watching that she will. Parents live in fear of the progressive ideology that is being pushed in some of our schools. I hear from them regularly. But Judge Jackson's answer to my question made perfectly clear to me and to everyone watching that she will be a certain vote for government overreach in private family decisions. She has written, and I'm quoting her, these are her words, that every judge has personal hidden agendas, end quote. That influences the cases they decide. While that may not be true for all judges, it is of concern at many cases, and it is of concern that this is her view. This hearing, the judge's record have made it clear that she will interpret the Constitution through the lens of progressive ideology. Her refusal to define a simple word, woman, is only one example of many. Another is her desire to make excuses for some of society's worst offenders. She has suggested that we are too tough on child predators, and as a judge, she has ensured that these offenders receive some of the lightest sentences possible. She serves on the board of a K-12 school that teaches kindergartners that they can choose their own sex and teaches them about so-called white privilege. And she has praised the now discredited 1619 Project and has stated that judges should consider critical race theory in sentencing criminal defendants. This hearing has revealed the extent of her personal hidden agenda, which explains why she is the favorite pick of some of the radical left dark money groups. But the role of a Supreme Court justice is to interpret the law, not to take up arms in a culture war. She promised the committee that she would decide cases from a neutral posture and that she would rule consistent with her judicial oath. While she may be sincere in that pledge, I still have concerns that her ideology may influence her jurisprudence. As I told her, her primary commitment must be to the Constitution, not progressivism. For those reasons, I am certainly going to vote no for Judge Jackson. Before I close, Mr. Chairman, I did want to address a point of process. You have repeatedly dressed down my Republican colleagues and me for asking Judge Jackson tough questions. You did it throughout the hearings, you did it at last week's markup, and you've done it repeatedly in the media, including before we even had a chance to ask a question. You called our questions vile, baseless, and imputed dishonorable motives to us. My colleagues and I expressed legitimate concern that Judge Jackson sentenced child pornography offenders to less prison time than the national average. Judge Jackson and my Democrat colleagues claimed that the probation reports justified her decision, so we asked to see them. It was a reasonable request, but you responded by insinuating that we wanted to hurt children, and you specifically questioned why I, as a mother, would take that position. That was a surprising comment. We want to make one thing clear. Questions are not attacks. Confirming a Supreme Court justice is one of our most important duties as United States senators. This is a lifetime appointment, and it would be a dereliction of duty to our constituents not to ask tough questions.
On YouTube, they having these little councils where they interrogate these people. I'm like, is they just telling you things that they did? If me and you did that, we'd be in jail immediately. But there's thousands of them doing this under Biden. Like Trump said, nobody gets fired under the Biden administration. All of the crimes and the foolishness that was going on, especially with one of the gay guys that was working with Biden, them stole somebody's luggage and was wearing their clothes. And you in the White House, and you out here embarrassing the country and your party and the people that you came into the White House with, and they did nothing about it. This is the stuff that we're talking about. So it's like people want to be like, okay, Trump, right? But what about the people you pushed for and voted for to be in there? Look at what they're doing now, though. That's our job, is not to arrest Trump or Biden. The people who's supposed to be arresting him, the ones that spying on everybody, the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, all these folks, why they not doing their job? But they doing their job to make sure Hunter and Biden them is good. And everybody's saying the foolishness with that. They was trying to get Trump. Evidently, they can't get him because they know that, because he, again, I said that was a dumb thing to have that January 6th that close to the building, but he still is on record saying that he had 10,000 people, the National Guard, ready to go. And not only did they deny Trump,
as well.
right, not only did they deny it, the generals the day before had already made plans to strip Trump of his powers, and they weren't going to listen to nothing he had to say. So he was caught on both ends, and also they found out that it was FBI agents in the crowd doing all this foolery to make it look bad. All this stuff is what takes place amongst rivals when they're not playing by the rules. So, but they're going to put it off to after he get out of there. Another group said they have to drop the charges because it would taint the system if they allow a person that's convicted to sit the seat. So now it's about optics and and this never happened before. And the fact is, they should have been trying to get Trump before he said he gonna try to run again. So as he tried to run again, now all of a sudden y'all want to start up with this stuff again. So all they did was show the public that somebody behind the scenes had power to make the Department of Justice go after Trump for papers that when he had in Mar-a-Lago, because they were saying, yo, you had paperwork that the government or whoever wanted it, and he wouldn't turn it over. So the thing is, when you start looking into that, I forgot what it's called, but presidents can declassify documents simply by saying these documents are declassified. That's how simple it is. It's not a law on the books. They can just verbally say it. And they knew he took that stuff with him. But the problem is they would have pushed that as hard as they were trying to push to make people look at Trump different. If they pushed, well, they can do this. They can declassify. They can declassify with the same energy they put on other stuff. The people are like, this is a witch hunt. This is ridiculous. Because if he was able to do that, then why are y'all trying to go against that if the man has the right to declassify? Why all of a sudden now y'all saying he got this and that, he got that? Then they slipped up when they found out that Biden had similar documents in his garage next to his old Corvette. At least Trump had this stuff in his apartment, in his hotel, in a room somewhere locked up. Biden had documents that could be used depending on who got them. You got them sitting in the box in your garage. So they tried to get Trump, but gave Biden the pass, say he was too, he was too old to something. They made up some excuse about it, and it just made them look bad. And then they just kept going. The next thing, then the guy that said he paid the porn star the money.
Stormy Daniels.
Huh?
Stormy Daniels.
Yeah, Stormy Daniels, but it was the guy. He already the one that paid her. He went to jail. The fans gave him.
Cohen.
Yeah, Cohen. They gave him like 80 years. He was in jail for like 2 years or so. The fans let him out to testify against Trump. Like all this stuff is like, y'all make no sense.
Well, I followed it very closely. I know you did yourself, but the run up to this election was a shocking thing. I mean, when I saw the shots, fired at Trump at the rally, and I knew something was going on because for myself, he looked too comfortable. He looked too open, and for that man to even continue in the race, even now, shows a lot of pride for the country, a lot of pride, and I wish people kind of put the past. Yes, he did make mistakes. I don't think he will do that again, but you can't beat a man when he tries, or a woman, or anyone who tries. If someone tries, and believe you, he tried, and he done very well. Joe Rogan, he went over to Joe Rogan. His rallies, his debates with Biden, his debate with Kamala Harris, it was an extraordinary victory, and
they helped him
the
win.
man deserves his flowers.
Yeah, they helped him win.
I'm not pro-Trump, and I know you're not pro-Trump. It's not about that, is it?
It's because what we got, like Victor said, it's a two-tier system. You got only two people you can choose from. Like I said, we didn't create a system like that. And so we shouldn't be arguing tooth and nail behind something. But like I said, they was over-invested into something, and they want to holler about racists. It's like you can't, when a person is on record in the past being racist for a long time, and they like, oh, Trump did this when he wouldn't rent to the black people and all of that. My thing is, they were so upset with that, but wasn't equally upset with Biden with the stuff that he said, and he created a crime bill that incarcerated a lot of adult people. Now, again, we have to contrast with Trump because that's all we got. So we got Trump being a racist according to the history in the newspaper, and the Central Park 5 as far as him putting out stuff in the newspaper and all that they should be prosecuted and all of those stuff. We got that. So we got a person that was racist as far as, let's say, housing, but the person is not on record funding groups to lock up black people, then you put Biden up there. He said he didn't want his kids going to school.
That was a blatant defamation of character.
Right, and he said it was like the school and all of those stuff. So when you look at it and you start, he said you have to look at it that y'all are not anti-racism, as you're not being equal. You're being fake.
We have no race pride, have we? We haven't had black people in the politics in this country, and I disagree with it. I disagree. I believe that these countries are white people's countries at the moment, and they should run their country. And we should run our countries. So if someone is pro for his race, then that is how it's supposed to be. I mean, the kind of situation they want us to be in is to kind of to have this false narrative as if we are getting somewhere if we get into these kind of positions. And we are at the bottom of every country where we are in. Even in our own countries, we have become servants. And a race pride and apply what Noon said with racism. You know, this is just something of nature. I done a show about the butterflies, you know, and all the butterflies have different markings. They all share the same body shape and same, for example, features, but you never see different color butterflies hanging out together. Racism is what we got to understand. That is what is taking place. That is what has been taking place. And we don't have any race pride. We don't have any. We become servants to our masters who used to be our master. So when I saw Kamala Harris in her position, I never got the feeling as if that's going to uplift black women. The only time we can sort of uplift each other is if we're running our own. We have our own laws. We're living all amongst our own people, and everybody is managing themselves.
I'm not going to see that in the Western world, in the modern world. But when you go around the world, certain places they still are sovereign. Maybe they live in that way. It may not be to a point where it's like wow, because it's only a certain amount. It's not millions upon millions like a country. It's not like that, and we already understand that. So I wasn't really worried about. I just know when the thing with the politics happened, because I just knew what I knew about Agenda 21 and all that. It didn't matter who it was, but I still looked at it because that was the party that I got. I got videos going back to 2019. I just Kamala and her sister. So just about her being down with the agenda.
Okay.
You know, so her sister was hanging out with John Podesta and all of them. And all that pizza party stuff. So I already knew. But again, this is things that we learn when you do a deep dive, and then the people you read about, it's so many of them, you really be like, you really don't be paying no attention until they really pop out there on the world stage. So when she popped out there in 2019, and Tulsi Gabbard smoked her boots, and she dropped out, I mean, it was nothing else to really think about that. So because she was hanging out with Biden, it just made people go back and again, the internet worked against them this time, as well as the people. And that's why they couldn't, and she couldn't beat the internet. She couldn't hide, they couldn't scrub her history enough, especially when she put her book out, and then Candace Owens and them exposed that black lady wasn't really her grandma. You know, and then they said they revised the book some time ago and changed certain things.
Well, happy Tuesday. I can tell you guys one thing. The powers that be really did not like our episode yesterday, because after we crossed 500,000 views in less than 5 hours, suddenly we got hit on YouTube with this bizarre age restriction. We've never been hit with that ever before. It said that we somehow violated the policy on graphic violence and nudity. I mean, what? We literally just read Kamala's book and pointed out a major discrepancy. Mainly that her grandmother, who she produced a photo of herself with, happened to die before Kamala was born. So yeah, seems a little odd. Just asking questions here. Well, today we were able to secure the birth certificates and the death certificates and some marriage certificates, which confirm that Kamala either made a huge mistake, all by accident, or she outright lied because she wanted to convince the public that she was Black. Do not go away, you guys, because this is about to get crazy. Welcome back to Candace. Janet Jackson in a profile piece. It was very obvious they were trying to do the wacko jacko bit again, like they did with her brother. So to remind you, Janet Jackson brought up in her interview human trafficking, child trafficking, and the journalist then decided to heavily imply that Janet Jackson was just nuts to pretend that we have a child trafficking issue in this country. And then when the reporter switched gears and asked her about supporting Kamala Harris as the first female Black president, you know, Hollywood's all got to get in line and support this woman or else, Janet Jackson simply said that she had heard that Kamala was not Black and that she was in fact Irish, and the media predictably went completely crazy. I mean, here are some of the headlines here. NBC, Janet Jackson tells interviewer she's heard Kamala Harris is not Black, echoing election disinformation. Oh, love that word. Newsweek, Janet Jackson's Kamala Harris remarks spark Black backlash. The Independent, she's not Black. Janet Jackson makes shocking comments about Kamala Harris's heritage. And of course, the New York Times, Janet Jackson repeats false claims about Kamala Harris's race. False claims. So to be clear, all Janet Jackson said was, quote, "That's what I heard, that she's Indian, that her father's white. That's what I was told. I mean, I haven't watched the news in a few days. I was told that they discovered that her father was white." Okay? That is all that she said that led to all of this craziness in the media trying to paint her like she was some sort of a psycho. And then her manager, a guy named Mo El-Marzi that I'm showing you a picture of here, he offered an apology on Janet Jackson's behalf to BuzzFeed. He said, quote, "Janet Jackson would like to clarify her recent comments. She recognizes that her statements regarding Vice President Kamala Harris's racial identity were based on misinformation. Janet respects Harris's dual heritage as both Black and Indian and apologizes for any confusion caused. She values the diversity that Harris represents and understands the importance of celebrating that in today's society. Janet remains committed to promoting unity and understanding," end quote. And guess what happened? Janet Jackson fired him immediately and said that he was not authorized to make that statement at all, and she was not apologizing because she was not sorry, and good for her. I'm glad she fired him. I am so tired of people being so fake, having to apologize for something that should not have yielded any response from the media. In fact, it should have been the opposite. They should have went ahead and investigated the claim that Kamala Harris is Black, gotten to the bottom of it fully. But instead, it was a media pylon. And then, after being fired, Mo added to that pylon by referring to Janet Jackson as unbalanced. Like, the person who just worked for her came out and was like, she's unbalanced. I mean, with friends like that, who needs enemies? Then came me. I don't know. I guess I really am the person that has been in these streets, Kamala, because I decided to simply look into her genealogy, because why on earth is the world trying to convince me that this woman is suddenly Black? Like, they just decided she was Black because she's running and because there is evidence, it is true, that her father grew up in Jamaica. Your race does not magically change because of where you grow up, okay? If I grow up in Sweden, I don't get to suddenly say I'm white, okay? And what I discovered was quite startling. Now, I'll ask you, when did you first get the idea that Kamala was Black? Well, you'll say, yeah, when she kind of started running with Joe Biden. And that claim really came from Kamala herself. When they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, they understood that Kamala Harris published a book in 2019 called The Truth That We Hold. And presumably the book was filled with truth that she was holding. I had to look through it. And I saw this picture of her. And her grandmother, clearly a black-looking grandmother on page 282 in the photograph section. It reads, as you can see, visiting my paternal grandmother, Beryl, in Jamaica. Also on that same page, there's another photo of her. Again, you can see it's black and white. I'm not quite sure why it is black and white, but it says, when I was 10 months old, I visited Spanish Town, Jamaica. This is me with my mother and my paternal grandfather, Oscar Joseph. And now this guy looks mixed. He looks Asian of some description, but you can see the idea here is that she's definitely trying to introduce, in a manner of photos, things that make her race look more complicated. So I just decided to investigate that, and immediately things got weird, very weird. First and foremost, because it was very easy for me to determine via just a light search online that Beryl, her alleged paternal grandmother that you just saw, died 4 years before Kamala was born in 1960. So last night we decided to continue our research to see if we could find birth certificates and marriage certificates and death certificates, which could further signify those points, and indeed it did. It also raised even more questions about her genealogy, so let's go through those. Here is the birth certificate for her paternal grandmother. This is Kamala's paternal grandmother, Beryl. Okay, now you can see on this birth certificate that Beryl is spelled with an I. It's Beryl Magdalene. And you can see the reason why we know this is the correct Beryl is because the mother is listed as Iris Finnegan. Later on, we're going to show you in the book, she names Iris Finnegan as her great grandmother. So that would be Beryl's mother. So we have the right woman. Also, formerly, her maiden name is Allen. That is true. It also says here that she's born in October of 1917 in St. Anne. That's the St. Anne parish of Jamaica. And again, you can see it says it is signed by Iris Finnegan. Very clearly, this is the woman that we are looking for. This is Kamala's grandmother, alleged grandmother, Beryl. It's also interesting, by the way, that it lists her great-grandmother as a seamstress because Donald Harris, Kamala's father, wrote in a 2020 piece called Reflections of a Jamaican Father, quote, Miss Iris, that again would be his grandmother, was the mother of 8 children, too, was the sweetest and gentlest person one could meet, but underneath it was a tough farming woman who ran the cane farm at Thatch Walk, near Annan Town, jointly owned with her husband, Mr. Christie. Okay, that's weird. So you're telling me that she ran a farm because on that birth certificate it says that actually Iris was a seamstress, but whatever. Let's just park that aside for a second and stick with Beryl, this woman who died before Kamala was born, okay? Because I was feeling pretty certain that not too many people were going to be named Beryl and be born in the St. Anne parish of Jamaica in 1917 to a mother named Iris Finnegan. I felt confident that we could find a little bit more data, and in fact we did, okay? First, we stumbled across Beryl's marriage certificate. Okay, so you can see that right here. And now the name spelling has changed. You have Beryl Finnegan spelled with a Y in the same way that Kamala spells it. And it lists their married date as 1944. Again, you can see the parish that is listed is St. Anne Parish. This is where every piece of Beryl's life seems to take place. It reads here that her calling is a barmaid. And something that jumped out at me was the fact that she's married to someone, as you can see, named Lawford Newland. Okay, so Beryl apparently was married more than once because Lawford Newland is not Donald Harris's father, but Beryl is his mother. So just to be clear, again, it says that she married a guy named Lawford Newland in 1944 when she was 25 years old, okay? It's important to note that that would have been 4 years after she gave birth to Donald Harris, Kamala's father. I find that to be very strange. Also, regarding Kamala's father, we cannot seem to locate, regarding Lawland Newland, the person that she married, we can't find him. Can't find him anywhere. We cannot find a birth certificate. We cannot find a death certificate. We can't find a news item or otherwise. I cannot find this alleged Lawford Newland that apparently her grandma got married to. We also can't find a wedding certificate for Beryl and Oscar Wilde Joseph Brown Harris. That is allegedly supposed to be Donald Harris's father. Okay, so Kamala's grandfather is Oscar Wilde Joseph Brown Harris, and we can't find a marriage certificate between the two of them. That's very strange. As speculated, we were able to confirm that Kamala's Black grandmother that she showed us in that picture died in 1960, before Kamala was born. I can show you right now her death certificate. Let's take a look at Beryl's death certificate, which confirms. As you can see there, it says that she died in July of 1960. It also tells us on the right-hand side, you guys probably have to zoom in on this, but she died of a uterine infection, uterine fibroids due to a hysterectomy. It has her listed as 39 years. That's actually a couple of years off from 1917, so somebody may have gotten their math wrong here. But you once again see that it lists her birthplace as Saint Anne. And so this is a huge scandal. Just an absolutely huge scandal. In her book that she was standing next to her grandma Beryl, but grandma Beryl died in 1960, 4 years before Kamala Harris was born. So who the hell is the real Beryl? Who is Kamala Harris? And do you know what I noticed about that woman sitting next to her? She looks a lot like the woman that Kamala claims in her book is her great-grandmother, Iris. Now, that's Iris Finnegan. Here's the book with my great-grandmother, Iris Finnegan in Jamaica. Now, I'm going to give you the side-by-side of Iris and her alleged daughter, Beryl, who died at 39. Now, that woman on the right is not 39 years old. She's clearly much more advanced in her age. I mean, we know black don't crack. I mean, that's just a scientific fact. So I would put that woman on the right-hand side, who she tried to pass off as Beryl, and I think is the exact same person. I would say that woman looks to be about 65. And then it looks like she's more advanced on the left-hand side. The great-grandmother, that's the same person. When I just believe my own eyes, we're looking at the same person. What do you guys think when you look at those photos? How the hell does a person who is the vice president of the United States pass off a book, claim that these people that are in her book are her black relatives, and nobody bats an eyelash or does even a peripheral search to recognize that the woman that she put forth is implausibly her grandmother? And by the way, I'm going to say this and people can be offended, but the first thing that I thought when I saw the photo of her sitting on her great-grandmother's lap was that this doesn't look like a grandparent affection going on here. Like, this woman looks like she could be working for the family. Quite literally, I thought to myself, this woman looks like she could be the help. And I thought that because there's a lack of affection there. Do you know what I mean? But there's no, like, in both of the photos, there's a lack of affection. It's just like a woman standing next to her. And I obviously know that that was a circumstance. When you're talking about a family that had a ton of plantations, which is the reality. She descends from Irish slavers. That is a fact that Kamala Harris cannot deny. She descends from wealthy Irish slavers who virtually they did own the town. They named the town. It was Hamilton Town, then it was Brownstown in Jamaica. He had over 1,000 slaves, okay? It would follow that there would be help around the house. And I'm just gonna put here as a question mark, not as a fact. If they're looking at some of these photos of people who became like family and they're trying to pass them off like relatives, again, not a fact, a huge question mark, but my instinct tells me that that person is actually not her family member. And if it is, well, Kamala's got some explaining to do. Meet Grandma Beryl almost 20 years after Grandma Beryl died. Kamala Harris looks to be about 20 in that photo that she presented. Then there's another bit of a mystery, as I said. If Beryl married after her or before her wedding when she was 25 years old to the missing Newland, if anybody can find Newland, please let me know. But if Beryl married at some point Oscar Wilde Joseph Brown, where is their marriage certificate? And where is their divorce certificate? Again, I'm only prodding the narrative here because I'm going to need proof that she's black. the media has now made this a thing, and now you made it so much of a thing that you're attacking people like Janet Jackson when she asks a very reasonable question that you should be able to respond to. And now we have a verifiable lie that Kamala Harris told in her book, or a big uh-oh, because, you know, if I'm being nice, I guess sometimes you think when you're publishing a book that it's a photo of you and your grandmother that you never met or never could have met. Maybe Kamala was just confused and thought it was her grandma, but it was a grandmother that she had, again, never met. Media should be on this, and they should be asking her this question. How did you make this significant of a blunder in your book? And isn't it quite ironic that every photo that you have presented, two of which look like they're the exact same person, one aged on, which begs the question, is that even Kamala Harris in her lap? I don't know. Again, we're at the beginning of this investigation. But it's interesting that amongst all of the relatives, so many Irish white slavers, the only photos that she chose to put in this book are the ones that make it look as though she might be Black. And we have just significantly and without question debunked one of those photos.
And then Candace Owens them exposed that black lady wasn't really her grandma. You know, and then they said they revised the book some time ago and changed stuff, certain things. She got caught. That was it. You know, she wasn't doing anything that was gonna. She was doing certain things, but like I said, they didn't have enough time either. Biden should have been got out of there way before the debate with Trump, because we seen how crazy Biden was acting when he was in there. You know, the different looking Bidens, the slurring, saying wild stuff that didn't make no sense. They should have, they should have been got him out of there and let Trump and let Kamala have a crack at it. Or something.
At length with President Moon of South Korea. He came to Washington at length. And there's a lot of other, for example, the idea that we're, in terms of taxes, that they refuse to, for example, I was able to balance the budget and pass everything from the global warming bill anyway. requirements for membership action plan for Ukraine and to create a path to NATO membership while Ukraine continues to make progress on necessary reforms. But we're not waiting for that process to be finished to make the long-term commitments that we're making to Ukraine's security. Vladimir and I shouldn't be so familiar. Mr. Zelensky and I talked about the kind of guarantees we can make in the meantime. All those things we need to do, childcare, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID, with dealing with everything we had to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Beat Medicaid, beat it to death.
Them up too.
And Pelosi's not happy about that.
I mean, but they Kamala was a dog-skinned Hillary Clinton. And that's who she acted like.
Huh.
And she was following those people.
I think Hillary would have done a better. I mean, I think Hillary's a bit more. And I know, I'm not sure, but
she wouldn't have. She's not popular. She's a known face because her husband and all that stuff like that. But she's not popular. She just wouldn't have meshed. She didn't.
Yeah, but I mean, even though she's not popular, for myself, I think she's much better. I think Kamala Harris is one of the worst politicians I've seen for a long time. You know, she's really her performance was so poor.
Right, I'm saying she's not a good performer when it comes to that. Like Hillary can go off script; they have that ability, but she still wouldn't have did no better because black people. She's like a real white woman that she just don't gel with people that's not in her race. She's
what about the fake accents?
I mean, all that
was.
Yeah, I mean, but that's because she was trying to be wherever she needed to be, and like I said, that it was bad because they should have had the primaries, and they robbed 14 million people out of their choice.
Yeah.
And the fact that people that was going hard for her, they should have said, listen, y'all want to holler about right and wrong, about the opposite side? Y'all should have been looking at what she was doing. And when they said she's gonna be the next VP, I mean, the president, the elect selected to do all that. Yeah, y'all didn't. All of the voters who was Democrat strong, they should have all went to their headquarters, whatever, and said, hell no, y'all not gonna just do this and not let her duke it out with some other people, and that's what he messed up at. And all them people that voted for her, Victor and the rest of them, made an ass of themselves. Because I tried to tell them, I told them, even on my channel before they deleted it, I said that the card said this card said Biden was going to quit. He quit 7 days after we had said, and the card said she wasn't going to win. But YouTube deleted my joints because they're against facts. That's why they channels are still there. They don't present no threats to disinformation. While they was going around, like you said, talking about getting other people's channels flagged and all of that, they don't realize that my channel for sure was one that was not biased at all. I dealt with spirituality. They don't deal with spirituality. Y'all don't even know if these people believe in a God or anything. And the people just running around hollering about another human being that's just as flawed as them. I wouldn't be going hard. I didn't do that for Obama. I didn't even vote for Obama because I seen the movie that Chris Rock and them did with Bernie Mac now, when he was pretending to be a politician and he ran, and they figured out he was a fraud. And this was right before, and it came out before Obama started running. And you can see all of the characters in there was Obama and the Reverend. This is stuff that the Illuminati and them do. They make projects and then put them out and just to tell the public or who knows what's going on. And they make an excuse like, oh, well, we told y'all we was going to do this. But that's deception. No. You making a movie with people who are acting using real life things is not telling me that y'all finna put out a black person a year or so later after this that's gonna run for president that worked for us, that's gonna make some of the craziest rules and harm y'all. No, that's not the same thing. So the deep state is just as delusional and sick and twisted. But when you're dealing with regular people, man, like Victor and them, they are very uneducated. They do not have the wisdom and spirituality that goes above and beyond just because it's not quoted in a newspaper or some crap. And they don't want to hear that. And so they made a fool of themselves. They played themselves and they don't realize the damage that they did. You voted for somebody that have allowed, it's over 1 million children now and women that have been trafficked across the border and given to other people waiting on this side to take them off to be used in ways that's unimaginable. And the only thing y'all can say,
that is bad, man.
right? And the only thing you can say is Trump, bad man, Trump, Hitler. And then you say, okay, so where's the millions of people that Trump had killed in some kind of form? You comparing Trump to Hitler, who did he kill? You see?
That is like, foul, man. That is foul. That is really foul and very, very, it's such a low blow. I mean, I don't know how people could really compare Trump to Hitler. It is basically also offensive to the Jewish people that were, perished under
and the ones that survived. Right, and the ones, there's no truth to it. There's no facts.
Absolutely.
And it's like
they were obsessed about Trump. Basically, also offensive to the Jewish people that were, perished under.
And the ones that survived. Right, and the ones that survived. There's no truth to it. There's no facts.
Absolutely.
And they kept repeating it over and over. It's like
they were obsessed about Trump.
Hunters, the greatest the world has ever known. Каждый, правда.
Who's next?
There's a man going around taking names.
Do you like your father?
And he decides who to free and who to blame.
A gangster? A killer?
Whoever is unjust.
Tell me about this hunter. Once you're on his list, there's only one way off.
When the man comes around. When the man comes around. Embrace who you really are, son. And you will become a legend. When the man comes around.
Welcome back to America Decides. The Atlantic magazine has new reporting that claims former President Trump praised the control Hitler had over his military. According to the magazine, Trump at one point or another said, and I quote, "I need the kind of generals that Hitler had, people who were totally loyal to him, that follow orders." Opinion columnist for the New York Times, David French, joins us now. David, it's great to have you with us. You wrote today something I want to talk to you about in the context of these most recent reported comments. You said the best way to think about this race between former President Trump and Vice President Harris is a battle between a movement and a coalition, and that MAGA, the movement behind former President Trump, has a high floor and a low ceiling. What did you mean by those characterizations, and how do you think they fit into the way we should evaluate these most recent quotes attributed to Trump?
Yeah, when you're thinking about MAGA, the core Trump supporters, they really believe they're part of almost like a revolutionary movement. They believe that the world is against them. They're full of purpose and mission in supporting Donald Trump. And they're really in this place that is something that we've really not seen in modern American politics, and that they're in a place of near total devotion or total devotion. And so Trump, in that way, has pocketed just tens of millions of voters who he can count on absolutely no matter what. But the problem for him is that an enormous number of Americans look at that movement and are appalled by it. You know, they see comments like those that were reported in The Atlantic, where he talks about the loyalty that he demands of generals and wanting the loyalty that you saw from generals towards, or some of the generals towards Hitler. And they look at that and they're repulsed by it, utterly repulsed. Whereas members of his movement either just don't believe he said it at all or don't care, because that's nothing compared to the larger goal. And so he's got tens of millions of people who are going to support him no matter what. And Kamala Harris doesn't have the same kind of cultish movement behind her. So she has to assemble, like a jigsaw puzzle, people from a bunch of different walks of American life, from the left to the right, to try to defeat this movement. So she's got higher potential support because there's more people who oppose Trump than support Trump in America. But at the same time, she doesn't have that devoted base, and that's what makes her vulnerable.
David, do you have any sense that this movement behind Trump sometimes beguiles even Trump, meaning he leads into it even more than he otherwise would if he was looking at this election more strategically?
Absolutely, it beguiles Trump. He loves the roar of the crowd. He uses his crowds as sort of a kind of focus group to know what to focus on, to what to talk about more and in the public square. So there is absolutely no question that this beguiles him, and it also beguiles his movement. They have this symbiotic relationship where they reinforce each other. But at the same time, as they're doing it, as they're reinforcing each other, and as they're radicalizing, they're repelling and repulsing millions more Americans. And so that's why throughout the Trump era, the Trump movement has always been smaller. Remember, it's never won a popular vote. It's always been smaller than the Democratic coalition. But because of the Electoral College, because of the precise nature of the Trump movement, it has some advantages on election day. And that's why it's constantly a threat to win.
All the things that you just talked about, David, may be true, but Trump's never been better positioned, meaning there is a resilience to this movement that even now, the third time around, pollsters are still missing. How do you assess that?
Well, there's no question he's well positioned to win. I mean, I think anyone who's looking at this would say this race is a toss-up. So he's well positioned to win. But he's been well positioned to win every time he's run because of the same reason. And that reason, he has this huge, rock-solid base of support. So in any given election, he just has to add a few more additional voters to put himself right in contention, right into the thick of everything. So yeah, they're right. He is well positioned to win because he has this giant, giant base. And also he's well positioned because he's a challenger, and some Americans are not happy with the direction of the country. So even if they don't particularly love Trump, they'll view him as their only option for voting for change. And so, yeah, he is well positioned. However, at the same time, if you had a different Republican running, one who had a capacity to reach out beyond the base, I think they'd be running away with this election now. They wouldn't just be well positioned to win. They would be possessing a commanding lead and highly likely to win. So Trump's base is both a strong component of his support, but the relationship he has with his base and the nature of MAGA also limits his appeal.
David Friend.
Event yesterday, and massive. People trying to get in, begging to get in, cannot get in. Record-breaking attendance, fire, all the stuff that's going on, and the way the news reports on it is wild. But even before we go to that one, Rob, is this Trump speaking? Or is that how they're reacting to it?
So at MSNBC, where they spliced in clips of the 1939 Nazi.
Go to that one. Let's go to that one. Play that one, Rob.
But that jamboree happening right now, you see it there on your screen, in that place is particularly chilling. Because in 1939, more than 20,000 supporters of a different fascist leader, Adolf Hitler, packed the garden for a so-called pro-America rally. A rally where speakers voiced anti-Semitic rhetoric from a stage draped with Nazi banners. When a Jewish protester rushed the stage, the Associated Press reported, quote, instantly, a dozen or more stormtroopers set upon him, knocking him down and beating him as he held his head in his arms. Most of his clothing was torn from his body. Later, he was booked for disorderly conduct. Now, against that backdrop of history, Donald Trump, the man who has threatened to use the military against opponents he calls enemies from within, who has threatened to use the troops to quell what he says are lawless cities, and to use those troops to carry out mass deportations of immigrants, is once again turning Madison Square Garden into a staging ground for extremism.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine how to spin it? In the same arena that Joe Frazier Ali and the greatest comeback, Donald Trump, you say Nazi? Dennis, how do you process MSNBC, present what happened?
Well, I'll tell you how. As I mentioned earlier, my field of study, I was one of 7 students in all of Columbia University to major in what was called communist affairs. It was tens of, 10,
you
20.
majored in communist affairs?
Yes, that's right. I was the Russian Institute at the School of International Affairs. Learned Russian, went to communist countries every year.
And I wanted to understand the enemy. That was basically what it was. I learned Russian to read Pravda, not to be able to converse or read Dostoevsky. And so I know the left very, very well. And the first use of this terminology was from Stalin. Stalin called Trotsky a fascist. Trotsky, with Lenin, founded the Bolshevik Party, not Stalin. Stalin was one of the early leaders, but the founders were Lenin and Trotsky. Trotsky was the head of the Red Army in the civil war that followed the Russian Revolution. You can't get more communist than Trotsky. But he became an opponent of Stalin after Lenin's death, and he fled the Soviet Union, fled to Mexico, and Stalin sent assassins to kill him with an ice pick, which was done in Mexico. He called Trotsky a fascist. So every one of your listeners needs to understand this. All leftists, not liberals, I make that distinction every time I speak. All leftists, since Lenin, since Stalin, have done the exact same thing. They call their opponents fascists. There is no exception. That is what they do. They call them the worst possible names. I'll give you one other law about the left, and that is there is no example of the left being in power, whether in a country or at a university, and allowing dissent. There is no example. And I have, my favorite is Prime Minister Ardern, Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand. I have played this on my show. You should definitely use this. It's easy to find the clip. During the lockdowns, she said to her people, if you do not hear it from the government, it is not true. Do you know who said that? Yes. And by the way, guess where she is now? Harvard. She's teaching at Harvard. She is a kindred spirit to Harvard. Harvard, whose motto is Veritas, which means truth, but it's a joke. It means nothing to any left-wing group. Truth is, what is the Soviet communist newspaper that I learned Russian to read? Pravda. Pravda means truth. Truth in the left-wing world is what they say it is. It has no objective reality. The Oregon Education Department announced the idea that math has a correct answer is white supremacy.
That is wild to be thinking that. That is wild to be thinking that. I want to play a couple other clips here. While we're on this, trust me, we're going to come back. Rob, maybe play Musk, Dana, and Trump, and then we'll go back to the next part. Go for it.
Out there who need to vote for President Trump. Okay, so this is a real battle. This is a real election battle. So you need to get friends and family to vote. Make sure they vote early. This is important. We're going to be putting up a scorecard, okay? An early vote scorecard, state by state, county by county. What is the scorecard? Vote early. Vote now.
He's rallying people. What did Dana say, Rob? He's rallying people. Go ahead.
He loves this country so much, he's literally put his life on the line for it. What is the other candidate proving? She can get your party's nomination without even facing voters. What else? What else can she offer the American people other than vague promises and no plan? She talks a lot about the need for change and her hope for the future. Hope and change. Does that sound familiar?
Weird.
She can use the old Obama playbook, but she's not Obama, and she is no agent of change. She is the sitting vice president of the United States right now. What she hopes is voters will focus on the future because she doesn't want us looking at the last 4 years to see what we really need to change. We need change.
Go to a clip with Trump. Let's see what. Go for it.
I know many of them. It's just this amorphous group of people. But they're smart and they're vicious. And we have to defeat them. And when I say the enemy from within, the other side goes crazy. Becomes a sound, oh, how can he say? No, they've done very bad things to this country. They are indeed the enemy from within. But this is who we're fighting, what they've said. Even that enemy too, and they're really the enemy. They're the enemy of the people, the press. They said one thing about me that I consider a great compliment. They said, this guy is the most consistent person we've ever seen.
We're watching a rally from Madison Square Garden.
That is so